This story is titled, My Fiancée Wanted a Relationship Break, but her smartwatch fitness app showed heavy nighttime activity. So I blocked her cards and left her stranded at an expensive resort where she begged for financial help. Sup Reddit, my name is Derek, and I'm a 34-year-old logistics coordinator for a manufacturing company. It's not the most glamorous job in the world, but it pays the bills well, and I'm genuinely good at solving complex problems. A skill that would prove more useful than I ever imagined. I've been married to Victoria for 9 years now. She's 32 and works as a corporate event planner for a high-end resort chain, organizing everything from fancy business conferences to wedding receptions for people with more money than sense. Victoria's job has always been demanding, involving crazy hours, weekend events, and late-night vendor calls. She frequently travels to different properties across the state, coordinating elaborate events for wealthy clients. I never minded the irregular schedule because she was genuinely passionate about her work, and honestly, the money was solid too. We both worked hard and had built what I thought was a good thing together. But around 6 months before everything completely blew up, something shifted in our relationship. I can't really put my finger on exactly when it started, but Victoria began to feel distant. Like she was physically present, but mentally somewhere else entirely. Our conversation started feeling forced and awkward. She would zone out during dinner, always checking her phone with this distracted expression on her face. Then came the weekend trips. These started maybe 4 months before I finally caught on to what was really happening. Victoria would announce on a Wednesday that she needed a mental health break and was going to her parents' place for the weekend. Or she'd tell me she had booked some spa getaway to decompress from work stress. Look, I'm not a clingy husband, and we all need space sometimes. Her job is legitimately stressful. Managing rich people's events means dealing with impossible demands and entitled clients who think money can solve any problem. If she needed solo time to recharge, I was fine with that. I'd use those weekends to catch up on projects around the house or hang out with my buddies. But something felt fundamentally off about how she acted when she came back from these trips. It's hard to explain, but she seemed guilty and energized at the same time. Like she was hiding something significant, but also felt really good about whatever it was. When you've been with someone for almost a decade, you pick up on their patterns and subtle changes in behavior. The night everything changed was a Thursday in September that I'll never forget. Victoria was supposedly at her parents' house for some family thing that I wasn't invited to, which wasn't unusual. Her family can be overwhelming sometimes, and it's often easier if I just stay home. She had driven up after work and wasn't planning to be back until Saturday, giving me a quiet evening to myself. I was having a Netflix night around 11:30 p.m., just thinking about heading to bed, when my old tablet suddenly lit up on the coffee table. The thing had been sitting there collecting dust for months, but it was still synced to Victoria's fitness tracker for some reason we'd set up ages ago and forgotten about. A notification popped up at 2:23 a.m. that made my blood run cold. Way to go! You burned 731 calories in 51 minutes. Keep it up! I stared at that screen for a solid minute, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Victoria genuinely hates working out. She despises it with a passion that's almost impressive. She's one of those people who thinks gyms are essentially torture chambers designed to make people miserable. She would rather get a root canal than go for a jog, and her idea of exercise is speed walking through Target during a shopping trip. So what the hell was she doing burning over 700 calories at 2:23 in the morning at her parents' house? And why was this intense activity taking 51 minutes? That's when my brain started connecting dots that I desperately didn't want to connect. I opened the fitness app on the tablet and started scrolling through Victoria's recent activity data. What I found made my stomach drop completely. There were pattern after pattern of late-night calorie burns during her weekend trips, always between midnight and 3:30 a.m., always showing high numbers like 500, 600, or 700 plus calories burned. The dates lined up perfectly with every single spa weekend and family visit over the past 4 months. Every single one. My stomach was in knots, but my logistics brain kicked into overdrive. This wasn't random behavior. This was systematic and deliberate. And if she wasn't actually working out at 2:23 a.m., which we both knew she absolutely wasn't, there was really only one other physical activity that burns that many calories and takes that amount of time. The realization hit me like a freight train. I sat there in the dark living room for probably an hour, just processing what I had stumbled onto. Part of me wanted to call her right then and demand an explanation, but I've learned over the years that emotional reactions usually make situations worse rather than better. The smart play was to investigate quietly and thoroughly. If I was wrong about this, no harm would be done. But if I was right, then I'd have exactly what I needed to handle the situation properly. I closed the tablet and went to bed, but sleep was basically impossible. I kept running through different scenarios in my head, trying to find innocent explanations. Maybe she had taken up late-night yoga classes. Maybe her parents had installed a home gym, and she was finally getting into fitness. Maybe the fitness tracker was malfunctioning and giving false readings. But deep down in my gut, I knew the truth. You don't burn 731 calories doing yoga. You don't exercise at 2:23 a.m. unless you're trying to hide something. And fitness trackers are pretty damn accurate with their measurements. The next morning, I started planning how to get more concrete information without tipping Victoria off to my suspicions. If she was cheating on me, confronting her with just the fitness data would be incredibly stupid. Cheaters lie reflexively. They gaslight you. They make you think you're crazy for not trusting them, and they'll explain away any evidence you present. I needed undeniable proof that couldn't be explained away with creative storytelling. So I decided to become a detective. I would approach this methodically, carefully, and completely legally. If my wife was living a double life, I was going to document every second of it with precision. Step 1 was solving the GPS situation, which turned out to be easier than I initially thought. Victoria had been complaining for months about her phone battery dying during work events, always at the worst possible times. She'd get stranded without navigation or be unable to call vendors when problems arose. So I suggested adding her to my family GPS plan for safety reasons, selling it as a thoughtful husband gesture. If her phone died during an emergency, I could still track her location and help if needed. She thought it was incredibly sweet and agreed immediately without any hesitation. Boom! I now had real-time location tracking that was completely legal and consensual. The app I chose lets you see current location plus 30 days of detailed location history. Within a week, I had a clear picture of where she was actually going during these mysterious weekend trips. Step 2 was gaining access to her text messages, which required some technical knowledge, but nothing too crazy or illegal. We had been sharing an iCloud account for years to manage family photos and app purchases. Most married couples do this because it's convenient and saves money. What Victoria didn't realize was that iCloud can sync text messages across multiple devices if you set it up correctly. I had an old iPhone sitting in a drawer that I'd kept as a backup device. I logged it into our shared iCloud account and enabled message forwarding, then casually mentioned to Victoria that I was testing it for work security purposes since my company was implementing some new bring-your-own-device policies. She barely paid attention to my explanation and didn't think twice about it. Now, every text message she sent or received was automatically copied to the backup phone. Reading someone else's private messages feels terrible and invasive, but finding out your wife is cheating on you feels infinitely worse. Step 3 was setting up home surveillance. I added motion-activated cameras in our garage with cloud backup capability, telling Victoria it was for package theft prevention, since we'd had some issues in the neighborhood recently. She was actually happy about the security upgrade and thought it was a great idea. The cameras would capture timestamps of when her car left and returned, which would be crucial for establishing patterns and corroborating other evidence I was gathering. All of this surveillance was completely legal. We're talking about shared marital property, shared accounts, and consensual GPS tracking. I wasn't hacking into anything or breaking into private systems. I was just using technology we already had access to in ways she hadn't thought about. Once the data started flowing in, I had a clear picture forming within just a few days. The GPS tracking showed Victoria going to the same area in Brickell during her supposed family visits. Not her parents' neighborhood, not any spa I could identify on maps. Just this upscale district filled with expensive condos and trendy restaurants. The text messages started revealing the other player in this unfolding drama. His name was Brandon. He was 33 years old, and he worked as some kind of luxury catering specialist. His business involved setting up exclusive dining experiences for high-end clients. Basically, he'd arrange private chefs, servers, venue setup, the whole 9 yards for rich people who wanted restaurant-quality meals in intimate, private settings. It made perfect sense why he'd be working with Victoria's resort chain. They probably used his services regularly for VIP guests or special events that required that extra touch of exclusivity. The messages between them started professionally enough. Discussions about upcoming events, vendor recommendations, scheduling conflicts for various projects. But you could see the relationship getting personal over time. crossing professional boundaries bit by bit. The early messages started innocently enough. Victoria would text things like, "Thanks for staying late to finish the Henderson event details. You're a lifesaver." Brandon would reply with, "No problem, always happy to help when you're involved." Then it escalated to, "Your attention to detail is incredible. The client loved everything." His response was, "I aim to please, speaking of which, any chance you're free for dinner this week? I found this new place I'd love your professional opinion on." This was classic workplace flirting that was clearly crossing the line into personal territory. You could see the progression happening in real time as I scrolled through weeks of messages. By the time I started monitoring their communications, they were full-on sexting each other. Messages like, "Can't stop thinking about our last meeting, your presentation skills are impressive among other things," made my blood boil. Reading your wife's affair text is like getting punched in the stomach repeatedly. Every single message made the situation worse, but I kept documenting everything meticulously because I knew I'd need ironclad proof later when this all came to a head. The GPS data was revealing an incredibly clear pattern. Victoria was meeting Brandon at this specific address in Brickell during all her supposed weekend trips. It was a high-end condo building in the Arts District, exactly the kind of place that screams successful bachelor pad to anyone who sees it. Cross-referencing the text message timestamps with her location data, and those fitness tracker notifications painted a crystal-clear picture of what was happening. She would drive to his place around 10:30 p.m., spend 3 to 4 hours there, then drive home in the early morning hours. The calorie burns from her fitness tracker always happened during those exact visits, with the timing matching up perfectly. I could have confronted Victoria at this point, but that seemed like a terrible strategy. Cheaters lie reflexively when they're caught. It's like breathing to them. She would probably admit to some kind of emotional affair, but minimize all the physical aspects. She'd claim it was just a mistake, beg for forgiveness, promise to end it immediately, and swear it would never happen again. Then 6 months later, I'd be right back to wondering if she was really working late or secretly meeting him again. I needed evidence that was completely impossible to deny or explain away with creative storytelling. Something that would end this situation cleanly without months of pointless couples therapy and false reconciliation attempts that would just delay the inevitable. That's when I decided I needed to get visual proof of what was happening. I found a short-term rental apartment directly across from Brandon's building and told the property manager I was a freelance photographer working on an urban architecture project. I explained that I needed a corner unit with good sightlines for my artistic documentation work. I managed to get a month-to-month lease and set up my surveillance operation. I brought a decent camera with a telephoto lens, nothing creepy or invasive, just enough equipment to clearly identify people and vehicles from across the street. It felt absolutely surreal sitting there, waiting to photograph my own wife cheating on me. Like I was directing some kind of nightmare documentary about my own life falling apart. But I'd come this far in my investigation and needed to see it through to the end. It didn't take long to get exactly what I needed. On a Thursday night at 11:52 p.m., Victoria's car pulled into the visitor parking area of Brandon's building. She walked up to the entrance like she owned the place, using some kind of key fob to get inside without any hesitation or nervous looking around. This was clearly a well-established routine for her. Brandon met her at the lobby door, and they were all over each other before they even made it to the elevator. Hands everywhere, kissing like desperate teenagers who couldn't control themselves. I took clear photographs of her arriving, the two of them together at the entrance, and her finally leaving at 3:21 a.m. with timestamps on everything. The GPS data from that specific night showed her phone at that exact location during those precise times. Her fitness tracker recorded a 693 calorie burn from 12:28 a.m. to 1:22 a.m. Game over. I had photographic evidence, location data, text messages, and biometric data all telling the exact same story. She was systematically cheating on me and lying about every aspect of it. Before I made a single move toward confronting her, I made one very important phone call. A buddy of mine had gone through a brutal divorce a few years back, and he gave me the number of his lawyer. The first thing the attorney told me was simple but crucial. Lock down the finances immediately. That same afternoon, I froze our joint checking account and pulled my direct deposit into a new personal account. I transferred anything with my name on it into a protected trust under my sole control. I opened new credit cards and systematically canceled anything Victoria had access to. For our mortgage, I started the paperwork to refinance it under my name only. Victoria had absolutely no idea any of this financial maneuvering was happening. She was still texting Brandon flirty little inside jokes and planning their next secret meetup, while I was methodically scrubbing our financial footprint like I was preparing for war. My lawyer started building the legal case, while I quietly made sure Victoria would have exactly zero financial leverage when this whole thing finally exploded into the open. I decided to let her enjoy one last weekend of luxury before all the lights came on and reality hit her like a freight train. Now, I needed to figure out how to confront Victoria. And that's when I remembered the couple's retreat. About 3 months earlier, Victoria wouldn't shut up about this couple's retreat she had found online. It was some overpriced mountain resort where they supposedly guide you through emotional reconnection with activities like sunrise meditations and candlelit therapy circles. The whole thing sounded like overpriced hippie nonsense to me. Back then, I thought our marriage was solid, so I laughed off her suggestions. But she kept pushing the idea week after week, acting like this retreat was going to magically fix whatever vibe issues she thought we were having. To get her off my back, I eventually gave in and booked the full weekend package. It was non-refundable, and they required everything up front: deposit, accommodations, activity fees, the whole deal. Almost $3,200 disappeared from our account the moment I clicked confirm. The funny thing was that the moment I actually booked the retreat, Victoria completely stopped bringing it up. She never mentioned it again, which should have been a red flag in retrospect. I guess she had found a different way to reconnect with someone. Months later, after everything had come to light, I remembered that reservation sitting in my email inbox. No refund possible, no cancellation allowed, already paid in full. Most people would have been annoyed about the wasted money, but I saw it as a perfect opportunity. I brought up the retreat casually one evening while we were having dinner. I told Victoria I'd been thinking about what she had said back then, and maybe she was right. Maybe we did need some professional help to work on our relationship. Her face absolutely lit up like she'd won the lottery. "Oh my God, Derek, that's exactly what we need," she said with genuine excitement. "I really think this could help us get back to where we used to be." "Sure, Victoria," I replied calmly. "Let's heal our marriage." During the entire trip to the resort, Victoria was chatty and unusually happy. She kept talking enthusiastically about all the different activities they offered, commenting on how beautiful the mountains looked, and repeatedly saying what a good idea this whole thing was. She seemed genuinely excited about spending the weekend working on our marriage and reconnecting as a couple. We arrived at this gorgeous resort nestled in the mountains that looked like something straight out of a travel magazine. Victoria was taking selfies constantly and posting them to Instagram with captions about quality time with my amazing husband, and so grateful for this opportunity to grow together. The irony of the situation was absolutely off the charts. I suggested we start with some individual reflection time before jumping into the official retreat activities. I told her I had prepared something special, a little presentation about our relationship journey that I thought would be meaningful for both of us. She thought it was the sweetest, most thoughtful thing ever. Victoria got comfortable on this fancy couch in our suite, poured herself some sparkling water from the welcome basket, and smiled at me like I was the most considerate husband in the entire world. I set up my laptop on the coffee table and clicked open the video presentation I had spent hours carefully editing together. The video started with a clean, professional title slide that read, "Victoria's Fitness Journey, a Comprehensive Data Analysis." She laughed and made some lighthearted comment about not knowing I was tracking her workouts, still completely oblivious to what was coming. The first section displayed her fitness data from the past 4 months in clear, easy-to-read graphs showing all the patterns, dates, and times. All those late-night calorie spikes during her supposed family visits were highlighted in bright red for maximum impact. Her smile started fading as the reality of what she was looking at began to sink in. "What is this?" she asked, her voice getting tighter. "Just documenting your impressive dedication to fitness," I said, keeping my voice completely calm and matter-of-fact. "Look at these numbers. 731 calories burned at 2:23 a.m. on a Thursday night. That's Olympic-level commitment to staying in shape." The second section showed GPS tracking data with detailed maps displaying her actual locations during each spa weekend and family visit. Brandon's address was clearly highlighted and labeled, with routes from our house to his building tracked in precise detail with timestamps for everything. Victoria went completely pale and started stammering about privacy violations, demanding to know how I dared to track her movements like some kind of stalker. But I kept the video rolling without interruption. "Privacy?" I said, looking directly at her. You mean like the privacy you gave me when you were screwing Brandon in his apartment while telling me you were visiting your parents? The third section displayed carefully selected text message excerpts. I wasn't trying to be a sadist, so I didn't include anything too explicitly sexual. Just enough screenshots with dates and times to show the clear progression from professional communication to personal intimacy. Derek, I can explain all of this, Victoria said desperately. Shut up, I replied firmly. We're not done yet. The final section showed the photographs I had taken. Her car in Brandon's parking lot, clear shots of the two of them at his building entrance, and images of her arriving and leaving hours later. Nothing pornographic or invasive, just undeniable visual evidence of her repeatedly going to his place during times when she claimed to be elsewhere. The video ended with a final slide that read, "Congratulations on completing your 9-year marriage workout program. Time for your permanent cool-down period." Victoria stared at the black laptop screen for maybe 30 seconds after the presentation ended. Then the waterworks started in full force. Tears, desperate apologies, the whole dramatic performance that cheaters always put on when they're caught red-handed. "It's not what you think, it didn't mean anything, I'll end it right now," she sobbed, cycling through all the greatest hits from the cheater's playbook. I let her run through the denials, bargaining, and fake remorse for about 5 minutes. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out the divorce papers that I'd had professionally prepared weeks earlier. "Here's your cool-down routine," I said calmly, placing the legal documents on the coffee table in front of her. "You're officially served." The crying stopped instantly when she saw those divorce papers. Now Victoria looked absolutely furious instead of remorseful. "You planned this whole weekend just to humiliate me," she demanded, her voice sharp with anger. "I planned this weekend to give you one last chance to be honest with me," I replied evenly. "You had 2 full hours in the car driving up here to tell me the truth about Brandon. You chose to keep lying and talking about fresh starts and working on our marriage instead." That's when Victoria started cycling through all the standard cheater defenses that I'd read about online. According to her suddenly revised version of our marriage, I was emotionally unavailable. Our relationship had been dead for years before Brandon came along. He understood her in ways I never could or would. I was controlling and paranoid for tracking her movements like some kind of psychopath. While she ranted and tried to rewrite history, I calmly packed my stuff. It took about 10 minutes to get everything back into my travel bag, and I could see her panic growing as she realized what was happening. "Where are you going?" she asked when it became clear I was actually leaving. "Home," I said simply. "The room's paid for through Saturday if you want to stay here and reflect on your choices. There's a shuttle service to town that runs at 8 a.m. Monday morning." "You can't just leave me here like this," she said, the desperation creeping back into her voice. "Watch me," I replied, heading toward the door. That's when Victoria realized the real scope of her problem. I had booked everything for this weekend on my credit card. The room, the meals, the activities, everything. She had maybe $15 in cash and 1 debit card that was connected to our joint account, which I had already frozen that afternoon. "Derek, I don't have money for gas or food," she said, the panic fully setting in now. "You probably should have thought about that before you decided to burn 731 You probably should have thought about that before you decided to burn 731 I'm sure Brandon will come pick you up if you ask him nicely." The look of absolute panic on Victoria's face was something I'll remember for the rest of my life. She was finally understanding that actions have real consequences, and that she couldn't just charm or manipulate her way out of this situation. I walked out of that luxury suite and drove home in complete silence, leaving her alone with the divorce papers, no access to money, and a very expensive lesson about what happens when you mistake someone's trust for stupidity. Yeah, it was cold and calculated. But you know what's also cold? Spending months planning secret hookups with another man while your husband thinks you're visiting family and working on yourself. About an hour after I got home, the text messages from Victoria started flooding in. "Derek, please, you've made your point. Just send me gas money so I can get home." When I didn't respond to her initial pleas, she got nasty really quickly. "Do you think I need your help? Brandon's coming to get me. At least he actually cares about me, unlike you." That was followed by 6 missed calls in rapid succession and 1 final gem of a text message. "You always were a coward. No wonder I needed someone who could actually make me feel seen and appreciated." I blocked her number completely. Victoria managed to get Brandon to drive up and rescue her the next day. It took him 6 hours of driving round trip to get to the mountain resort and back to the city. I'm sure that conversation during the drive was absolutely fascinating. Nothing quite like a romantic road trip to discuss how your secret affair just blew up both of your lives. But I wasn't done with my revenge plan. Not even close. Here's what Victoria and Brandon didn't think about when they started their little workplace affair: professional ethics and corporate policies. Brandon wasn't just some random guy Victoria had met at a bar or through friends. He was a business partner whose consulting firm had exclusive contracts with Victoria's resort chain worth serious money over multiple years. Most companies have strict policies about romantic relationships between employees and contractors because it creates conflicts of interest and opens up potential for favoritism in contract negotiations. It also opens them up to lawsuits if other vendors claim they were treated unfairly. Any smart business takes this stuff seriously, especially in the hospitality industry where reputation and professional standards are everything. So I decided to do what any concerned citizen would do in this situation. I reported the relationship to Victoria's company's Human Resources Department. Monday morning after the retreat weekend, I called Victoria's corporate office and asked to speak with someone in Human Resources about a workplace conduct issue. I got transferred to this very professional-sounding woman named Margaret, who handles employee conduct investigations and policy violations. "Hi, I'm calling to report a potential conflict of interest involving one of your employees and a business contractor," I said, keeping my voice calm and completely matter-of-fact. I explained that I had recently discovered my wife Victoria was having an extramarital affair with Brandon, who I understood was a consulting partner with significant contracts with the company. I told Margaret that I thought the company should be aware of this potential conflict of interest and any possible policy violations that might be involved. Margaret took down all the details very professionally. She asked for full names, positions, how long I'd known about the relationship, and whether there was any evidence that company resources or business decisions had been compromised by this personal relationship. "Do you have any documentation of this relationship that you'd be willing to share?" Margaret asked. "Boy, did I ever," I replied. I emailed her some of the milder evidence I had collected. Nothing too personal or invasive, just enough to show this wasn't a baseless accusation from a bitter husband trying to cause trouble. I included some of the professional text messages that showed the progression from business to personal, along with timestamps that correlated with business events they had worked on together. "We take these matters very seriously," Margaret said after reviewing what I'd sent. "Thank you for bringing this to our attention. We'll be conducting a thorough investigation into this matter immediately." Apparently, corporate investigations move incredibly fast when there's potential liability and public relations disasters on the line. Within just 3 days, the company had interviewed Victoria, Brandon, and several other employees who had worked with them on various events over the past year. I heard through mutual friends who worked in the industry that Victoria was called into a conference room with Margaret and 2 executives from her division. They presented her with the evidence I had provided and asked for her complete explanation of the situation. Victoria apparently tried to downplay the whole thing as a brief emotional connection that never interfered with her work performance or professional judgment. She claimed Brandon was simply helping her through some marital problems and that things had gotten inappropriate. But it was already over and would never happen again. The problem with her story was that the GPS data and text message evidence clearly showed the affair was ongoing for months and directly coincided with several major client events that Brandon had worked on. It's pretty hard to claim there's no conflict of interest when you're literally sleeping with the guy who's bidding on your company's exclusive contracts. The company also interviewed Brandon, who apparently got defensive and tried to claim I was making everything up out of spite and jealousy. That strategy backfired spectacularly when the investigators showed him the time-stamped evidence, including photos and location data that proved the relationship was real and extensive. Within 2 weeks, Brandon's consulting contract was under serious review by the company's legal department. By the end of the month, it was officially terminated. The company cited violation of professional conduct standards and failure to disclose potential conflicts of interest in their formal termination letter. They also mentioned concerns about inappropriate use of company resources and access in their documentation. Brandon went from landing exclusive high-end catering gigs to scrambling for any work he could find literally overnight. When you're a freelance consultant, your reputation is absolutely everything in those specialized industries. Word spreads incredibly fast in those circles about why someone loses a major contract, especially when it involves professional misconduct. Other potential clients started asking uncomfortable questions. Why did his biggest account suddenly drop him? Was there some kind of misconduct involved? Could they trust this guy with their high-profile events? His business basically imploded within 6 months of losing that contract. He lost 3 other smaller contracts as word got around about the circumstances of his termination. He had to let go of his assistant and downsize his office space significantly. The financial pressure hit him like a freight train. That fancy Brickell apartment became way too expensive when your income drops by 80%. The lease on his BMW became completely unsustainable when you're scrambling to pay basic bills. I heard through the grapevine that he had to move in with a roommate and start driving a used Honda Civic just to make ends meet. Victoria's situation was more complicated since she was an actual employee with tenure and a decent performance record. The company couldn't just fire her outright without risking a wrongful termination lawsuit, especially since she hadn't technically broken any written policies. But that didn't mean there weren't serious consequences for her career. The promotion she'd been working toward for over a year simply vanished. She got passed over for someone with better judgment and professional integrity, a direct quote from her boss according to office gossip that made its way back to me. Her job responsibilities got quietly reduced without any official paperwork. No more managing high-profile client events that could make or break someone's career. No more working directly with external vendors where conflicts of interest could arise. She basically got demoted in everything but title and official documentation. Her expense reports started getting scrutinized much more closely than before. The accounting department began asking detailed questions about whether company resources had been used for personal purposes. Did she meet Brandon at expensive restaurants and charge meals to client entertainment budgets? Were there hotel rooms booked for business meetings that lasted unusually long hours? Here's the thing about workplace affairs that people don't think about. They're exciting when they're secret and forbidden. Take away the secrecy and add crushing financial stress, career problems, and social humiliation. And suddenly the romance isn't quite so appealing anymore. Brandon started resenting Victoria for getting him into this mess in the first place. In his twisted logic, if she had been more careful with her phone and communications, and if she hadn't married such a controlling psychopath, none of this professional disaster would have happened to him. Victoria blamed Brandon for being careless with their text communications and not properly considering the professional risks involved when they started their relationship. She felt like he should have known better as the outside contractor. The stress, financial pressure, and social isolation eventually killed whatever they thought they had together. It turns out that relationships built on betrayal and lies don't handle real-world adversity very well. Who could have predicted that? Brandon eventually moved to another city to try rebuilding his catering business and professional reputation from scratch. Last I heard, he was working for some small catering company, making a fraction of what he used to earn. Reputation follows you in specialized industries, and his was permanently damaged. Victoria is still working at the same company, but her career trajectory there is basically dead in the water. I seriously doubt she'll ever get promoted again, at least not at that organization. The whole affair became office legend. Remember that events coordinator who got caught cheating with a vendor? New employee orientation probably includes her story as an example of what not to do professionally. As for the actual divorce proceedings, having all that meticulously documented evidence made everything incredibly straightforward and efficient. There were no custody issues since we don't have children together. Property division was simple and clean since I had definitive proof of her misconduct over an extended period. Victoria didn't even try to fight most of my proposed terms because she knew I had her completely dead to rights with undeniable evidence. It's pretty hard to claim you deserve half of everything when there's video footage and GPS data proving you were systematically cheating for months while lying about your whereabouts. The divorce was finalized efficiently, and I thought that would be the end of this whole nightmare chapter of my life. But I was completely wrong about that. Victoria started what I can only describe as her image rehabilitation tour. She suddenly became very active on social media again, posting inspirational quotes about healing from toxic relationships and finding inner strength after experiencing betrayal. The subtle implication in all her posts was that I was the toxic one who had somehow betrayed her. It was really classy stuff, as you can imagine. She started systematically reaching out to our mutual friends with her carefully crafted version of events. According to Victoria's fantasy version of reality, our marriage had been completely dead for years before Brandon ever entered the picture. I was apparently obsessed with work and never paid any real attention to her emotional needs. Brandon was just a friend who provided emotional support during a particularly difficult time in her life. Yes, she admitted that things got inappropriate between them, but only because she was so starved for affection and understanding from her emotionally absent husband. According to her narrative, I had driven her into another man's arms through years of neglect and indifference. The worst part of her revisionist history was her claim that I had been stalking and harassing her for months before the confrontation. She painted my evidence gathering as the behavior of an unhinged, obsessive husband who couldn't handle his wife finding happiness elsewhere. The retreat confrontation was described as a calculated ambush by a psychopath who had been planning to humiliate her all along. Some people actually bought into this story initially. Divorce makes people feel like they have to pick sides, and if you only hear one carefully constructed version of events, it can sound pretty convincing. Victoria has always been good at manipulation and emotional storytelling. But here's the thing about the truth. It has a way of coming out eventually, no matter how much someone tries to bury it with lies. I didn't go around defending myself or getting into arguments with people who believed Victoria's version of events. Instead, I just started sharing objective facts when people asked me directly about the situation. When someone would say, "Yeah, Victoria mentioned that you were controlling and basically drove her away. What's your side of the story?" I would simply pull out my phone and show them the actual text messages between her and Brandon. I'd show them the GPS data and the fitness tracker logs, then let them draw their own conclusions. It's pretty hard to argue with time-stamped data and photographic evidence. My favorite incident was when Victoria's sister Emily tried to lecture me about not fighting harder for my marriage at a mutual friend's birthday party. She went on this whole speech about how marriage requires work and commitment, and how I should have tried counseling before giving up on 9 years together. I listened politely to her entire lecture, then pulled out my phone and showed her the photographs I had taken of Victoria at Brandon's apartment building at midnight on a Thursday night. "This is your sister arriving at her boyfriend's place when she told me she was having dinner with your family," I said calmly. "Was this the restaurant you guys went to?" Emily went completely pale and didn't say another word to me for the rest of the night. Apparently, she had been unknowingly providing alibis for Victoria's affair for months, telling me things like, "Oh yeah, Victoria had dinner with us last weekend," when Victoria was actually spending the night at Brandon's place. It's amazing how quickly people's attitudes change when they realize they've been lied to and used as cover for someone else's deception. Emily wasn't the only family member or friend who had been manipulated into providing false alibis for Victoria's secret activities. Our mutual friends faced an awkward choice: stay neutral in the divorce or pick a side based on who they believed was telling the truth. Most of them made their decision based on the evidence once they actually saw it. Once people viewed the GPS data, text messages, and photographs, the choice became pretty obvious. Victoria's social circle began shrinking dramatically as more people learned the real facts. She started posting increasingly desperate social media content about toxic people and knowing your worth and not letting others define your truth. It had that unmistakable divorced wine mom energy that made everyone uncomfortable. The inspirational quotes became more frequent and more bitter over time. She posted things about how some people can't handle strong women who know what they want, and how the truth always comes out eventually. Yeah, it sure does, Victoria. Meanwhile, my social life actually improved significantly. It turns out that people respect someone who handles betrayal with dignity and concrete evidence rather than drama and wild accusations. The friends who stuck by me after seeing the facts were obviously the ones worth keeping anyway. Quality over quantity, as they say. I even started dating again after a few months. Nothing too serious initially, just casual dinners and social events. But it felt incredibly good to have conversations with someone who wasn't constantly lying to my face about where they'd been or what they'd been doing. The real end of Victoria's reputation rehabilitation campaign came when she tried to attend our mutual friend Brad's wedding. She showed up solo, dressed to the nines, and clearly trying way too hard to appear happy and successful. The problem was that half the wedding party knew the real story by that point. During the reception, Victoria apparently tried to restart her victim narrative with some guests who hadn't heard her side of the story yet. She picked the wrong audience for her performance. Brad's new wife Phoebe had been one of the friends I'd shown all the evidence to months earlier. When Phoebe overheard Victoria telling someone that I had been emotionally manipulative and probably cheating too, she decided she'd had enough of the lies. Phoebe very publicly asked Victoria if she wanted to see the text messages where Victoria told Brandon she was so much happier without that boring husband and couldn't wait to start fresh with someone who actually understood her. Victoria left the wedding early and in obvious humiliation. I haven't seen her at any social events since then. The social nuclear option was complete and devastating. She went from being a respected events coordinator with a solid marriage and active social life to being a workplace pariah with no friends and a reputation for lying and manipulation. All because she thought she was smarter than everyone else and could control the narrative through charm and deception. Then, last Saturday happened. The unexpected visitor that I never saw coming. I was having a completely lazy morning, drinking coffee and reading on my back deck, when my doorbell rang around 10:15 a.m. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I checked the security camera feed on my phone to see who was at my door. There was Victoria standing on my front porch, and she looked absolutely rough. Not going to lie, my first thought was, what the hell does she want? Followed immediately by, thank God I installed those security cameras. I almost didn't answer the door at all. We have absolutely nothing to discuss anymore. The divorce is final, property has been divided, and we've both moved on with our lives. But curiosity got the better of me, and honestly, I wanted to see what kind of bullshit she was going to try to pull after all this time. I opened the door but stayed firmly in the doorway. I didn't invite her inside, didn't smile, and didn't offer any pleasantries. I just waited for her to explain why she was violating the boundaries we had established after the divorce. Hi, Derek, she said, her voice all shaky and nervous. Can we talk, please? I know you probably don't want to see me, but I really need to say some things to you. I crossed my arms and stayed exactly where I was. You've got 5 minutes. Start talking. Victoria launched into this obviously rehearsed speech about how she'd been in therapy for the past year. She talked about how she'd worked through her personal issues and gained insight into her behavior patterns. She claimed she understood now that what she did was wrong and had caused tremendous damage to both of us. I know I hurt you badly, she said, trying desperately to make eye contact with me. I know I betrayed your trust and completely destroyed our marriage. I've spent the last year and a half really examining myself and my choices, trying to understand how I became the kind of person who could do what I did. It was classic non-apology language, the kind of stuff you learn in therapy or self-help books. Notice how it was all about her journey and her personal growth, not really about what she had actually done to me or taking genuine responsibility for her actions. She kept going with the standard reconciliation playbook about taking responsibility and wanting to make amends for her mistakes. But then she finally got to the real reason she was standing on my doorstep. I miss what we had, she said, and right on cue, here came the crocodile tears. I know I don't deserve it, and I know I have no right to ask, but I'm hoping maybe we could try again. Start over completely. I'm a different person now, Derek. I've learned so much about myself. I almost burst out laughing right there on my front porch. After everything she had put me through, after lying for months, after the affair, after trying to destroy my reputation with false abuse allegations, she actually thought she could just show up and apologize her way back into my life. I've been watching your social media, she continued, which was creepy as hell and definitely not helping her case. I know you're dating someone, but maybe it's not serious yet. Maybe we could at least try being friends again and see where things go from there. That's when I realized what was really happening here. Victoria wasn't just delusional, she was desperate. Her career was permanently stalled, her social circle had completely disappeared. Brandon had dumped her and moved to another city. She was alone and probably struggling financially, looking for someone to rescue her from the consequences of her own actions. I let her finish her entire pathetic monologue before responding. The whole time she was talking, I was thinking about how this conversation was being recorded by my security system. That would turn out to be a very good thing, as you'll see in a minute. Victoria, I said, keeping my voice calm and measured, do you remember what you told Brandon about me in your text messages? Her face went completely white. Derek, those were just... You called me boring, I interrupted. You said you couldn't wait to start fresh with someone who actually understood you. You told him I was controlling and emotionally absent. You literally laughed about how clueless I was about what was going on. She started stuttering some weak excuse, but I wasn't finished. Then after I caught you red-handed, you told our friends I was abusive. You tried to make me the villain in your little story. You used our mutual friends as alibis for your affair. You lied to everyone about everything. I was hurt and angry, she said desperately. People say things they don't mean when they're going through emotional trauma. No, I said firmly. You meant every single word. And now that Brandon has dumped you and your life has fallen apart, suddenly I'm not boring anymore. Suddenly you want to reconcile and start over. The tears were flowing freely now, but I wasn't buying any of it. These weren't tears of genuine remorse or regret. These were tears of someone who had run completely out of options and was grasping at straws. Here's where the situation got really interesting. When the fake apology routine wasn't working, Victoria switched tactics completely and showed me exactly who she really was underneath all the therapy speak. "Fine," she said, her voice getting much sharper and more aggressive. "Maybe I made mistakes, but so did you. The whole retreat thing was incredibly cruel. You humiliated me and left me stranded with no money. That wasn't the man I married." "You're absolutely right," I said calmly. "The man you married was naive enough to trust you completely. That guy's gone forever." She tried several more angles and manipulation tactics. When she finally realized that I wasn't going to budge an inch, she got truly desperate and said something that made me incredibly glad I had cameras running. "You know what? Maybe I should tell people how you really treated me during the divorce," she said with unmistakable menace in her voice. "Maybe they don't know the whole story about how vindictive and cruel you actually were." There it was, the threat. Even in defeat, she was still trying to control and manipulate the situation. "Go ahead," I said without hesitation. "Tell whoever you want whatever you want. I've got 20 minutes of security footage of you showing up uninvited at my house, making excuses for your affair, and now threatening me when I won't take you back. I'm sure that'll really help your reputation." Her face went through about 5 different emotions in 2 seconds flat: anger, fear, realization, panic, and finally resignation. She understood that she had just made a terrible mistake. "I think you should leave now," I said firmly. I stepped back and closed the door, then watched through the security camera as she stood there for another minute before finally walking back to her car. I haven't heard from Victoria since that day, and I don't expect to ever again.